The Empire had conquered 17 star systems before they turned their attention toward the small blue planet spinning quietly at the edge of the galaxy. Their warships numbered in the thousands. Their soldiers had never known defeat. Their technology could break apart moons and redirect the paths of comets. When the Imperial Council voted to add Earth to their collection of subjugated worlds, they expected the process to take perhaps 3 standard cycles at most. High Commander stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the planet grow larger in the viewing screens. His scaled face showed no emotion, but inside he felt something close to boredom. Another primitive species, another easy victory, another world to strip of resources and populate with settlers. "Scan their defenses," he ordered his sensor officer. The officer ran his clawed fingers across the control panel. They have primitive satellites in orbit. Some appear to be communication devices. Others are simple observation platforms. Their weapons are chemical-based projectiles and basic nuclear warheads, nothing that could penetrate our shields. Made a dismissive sound. "Send the standard message. They have 1 planetary rotation to surrender unconditionally. If they refuse, we will demonstrate our power by destroying one of their major population centers." The message was sent. It was translated into every language that had detected being spoken on the planet below. The words were simple and direct. Surrender or die, bow or burn. These were the only choices the Empire ever offered. On Earth, the message arrived in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon. It interrupted television broadcasts. It appeared on computer screens and mobile phones. It echoed from radio speakers in cars and homes across every continent. For a long moment, the entire planet went silent. Then the response came, not from any single government, but from billions of voices speaking as one. The answer was no. High Commander received Earth's reply with genuine surprise. In his 200 years of military service, he had never encountered a species foolish enough to refuse surrender when faced with obvious superior force. He almost admired their stupidity. "Target their largest city," he commanded. "Show them what happens to those who defy the Empire." The weapons officer selected a massive urban center on the eastern edge of one of the larger landmasses. The city held over 20 million inhabitants. The targeting systems locked on, and a beam of concentrated plasma energy lanced down through the atmosphere. The beam never reached the ground. Alarms screamed across the bridge of the Eternal Dominion. The plasma weapon had struck something invisible, something that absorbed the energy and dissipated it harmlessly into space. Stared at the readouts with growing confusion. "What happened?" he demanded. "Unknown, High Commander. Our weapons appear to have been neutralized by some form of barrier we did not detect in our initial scans." Felt the first cold touch of uncertainty. "Scan again. Use all frequencies. Find out what they are hiding." The second scan revealed what the first had missed. Earth was not the primitive backwater it appeared to be. Hidden beneath the oceans, buried deep within mountains, concealed in underground facilities spread across every continent, there existed technology that should not have been possible for such a young species. Shield generators of unknown design, energy weapons that known physics. And something else, something the sensors could not fully identify, something that made the equipment register only static and error codes. "High Commander," the sensor officer said, his voice trembling, "they appear to have been waiting for us." Before could respond, the space around his fleet lit up with weapons fire, not from the planet below, but from seemingly empty space itself. Ships that had been invisible moments before now revealed themselves, rising from the darkness like predators emerging from shadow. They were human ships, but they were nothing like the primitive vessels they had expected. The first wave of attacks destroyed 30 warships in less than a minute. Watched his tactical display fill with symbols representing damaged and destroyed vessels. His fleet, the pride of the Empire, was being torn apart by a species they had considered barely worth conquering. "Return fire," he screamed. "Launch all fighters, activate emergency protocols." The fleet fought back with everything they had. Their weapons were powerful, their crews well-trained, their tactics refined by centuries of successful conquest. But the human ships moved in ways that seemed impossible. They appeared and disappeared at will, striking from unexpected angles, targeting critical systems with surgical precision. Deep within the mountain fortress that served as humanity's secret command center, General Sarah watched the battle unfold on a massive holographic display. She was a small woman with gray hair and calm eyes, and she had been preparing for this moment for over 50 years. "Phase 1 complete," she announced to the officers gathered around her. "The enemy fleet has lost 40% of its combat effectiveness. Begin Phase 2. The human ships changed their tactics. Instead of continuing to destroy vessels, they began to disable them. Precision strikes took out engines and weapons while leaving life support intact. Boarding craft launched from hidden bays, carrying soldiers equipped with technology that had been developed in secret for decades. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, found himself facing an impossible situation. His ship was dead in space, power failing, atmosphere bleeding away through a dozen hull breaches. Through the smoke and sparks, he saw human soldiers cutting through the sealed doors, their armor unlike anything in records, their weapons glowing with strange energy. The first human to reach the bridge removed her helmet. She was young, with dark skin and fierce eyes, and she looked at with an expression that was neither hatred nor triumph. It was something worse. It was pity. "High Commander of the Empire," she said in perfect, "you are now a prisoner of Earth. Your invasion has failed. Your fleet has been captured or destroyed, and your empire has made a terrible mistake." Stared at her, struggling to process what had happened. "How?" he managed to ask. "You are primitives. Your species has only possessed space travel for a few generations. How is any of this possible?" The woman smiled slightly. "You saw what we wanted you to see. You scanned what we allowed you to scan. For the past century, we have known that species like yours existed out among the stars. We have been preparing. We have been building. We have been waiting." She stepped closer to him, and despite his training, despite his experience, felt fear. "Your empire sent scouts to our system decades ago. Did you think we wouldn't notice? We captured them. We learned from them. We studied your technology and improved upon it. We read your history and discovered that you have conquered hundreds of worlds, enslaved billions of beings, destroyed entire civilizations." Her voice grew harder. "We learned what you were, and we decided that when you finally came for us, we would not simply survive, we would end you." Felt something he had never experienced before in his long life of conquest. He felt like prey. "What happens now?" he asked. The human woman turned away, looking out through the damaged viewport at the battlefield beyond. Earth hung in the distance, blue and beautiful, surrounded by the wreckage of his fleet and the sleek forms of human warships. "Now we come for your empire," she said. "Every world you have conquered, every species you have enslaved, every crime you have committed across the centuries. The bill has come due, High Commander, and Earth intends to collect." In the secret command center, General received word that the flagship had been captured and its commander taken prisoner. She allowed herself a small smile before turning to her communications officer. "Open a channel to the emergency session of the United Earth Council," she ordered. "Tell them the first battle is won, but the war is just beginning." Across the planet, people who had spent hours hiding in fear emerged to see the night sky filled with the lights of victory. They did not fully understand what had happened, but they understood that their world had survived. They understood that humanity had faced its greatest test and had not been found wanting. What they did not yet understand was how much everything was about to change. In the days that followed, the truth began to emerge. The secret programs, the hidden technologies, the decades of preparation, the captured scouts and the information extracted from their vessels. The alliance forged in secret with 3 other species who had been conquered by the Empire and who had been waiting desperately for someone strong enough to challenge dominance. The people of Earth learned that they were not alone in the universe, and that the universe was a far more dangerous place than they had ever imagined. But they also learned something else, something that filled them with fierce pride and grim determination. They learned that their species, for all its flaws and conflicts and struggles, had risen to meet a challenge that should have destroyed them. They had faced an empire that spanned star systems, and they had not only survived but won. Now they faced a choice. They could rebuild their defenses and wait for the Empire to send a larger fleet. They could hide behind their shields and hope that their victory would discourage further attacks. They could play defense for the rest of their existence. Or they could take the fight to the enemy. General stood before the United Earth Council and laid out her proposal. The Empire was vast, but it was also stretched thin. Its conquered subjects were restless, waiting for any sign of weakness. If Earth struck now, struck hard and fast and without mercy, they could shatter the Empire's grip on system after system. "We have weapons they cannot match," she said. "We have ships they cannot stop. We have the element of surprise and the fire of righteous anger. The Empire thought we would bow. They thought we would break. They were wrong." She looked at each council member in turn. "Now it is time to show them just how wrong they were. Now it is time to raise our banner across their empire, not as conquerors but as liberators. Every species they have enslaved will be freed. Every wrong they have committed will be answered. And when we are finished, the Empire will be nothing but a warning in the history books, a reminder of what happens to those who threaten the people of Earth." The Council voted unanimously in favor of her plan. Across the planet, men and women volunteered for the Liberation Fleet. In shipyards hidden deep beneath the oceans and on the dark side of the moon, construction continued around the clock. Within 3 months, humanity was ready to launch the largest military operation in its history. The Empire had come to Earth expecting to find primitives ready to be conquered. Instead, they had awakened something ancient and terrible, something that had survived ice ages and plagues and wars and disasters beyond counting. They had awakened humanity's will to fight, and now that will was coming for them. The first human fleet left Earth orbit on a morning when the sun rose golden over the Pacific Ocean. 300 warships, each one carrying enough firepower to crack a continent, formed up in perfect formation and engaged their faster-than-light drives. In the span of a heartbeat, they crossed distances that would have taken centuries at normal speeds. Their first target was a system called 7 in star charts. To the beings who actually lived there, it was known as the had been conquered 12 generations ago, so long that none of them remembered what freedom felt like. They worked in mines and factories, processing ore and manufacturing components for warships. Their children were taken at birth and raised to be laborers. Their culture had been erased, their language forbidden, their spirits crushed under the weight of endless servitude. When human ships appeared in their sky, they assumed it was simply a new group of masters come to take what little they had left. Captain commanded the lead vessel, a sleek destroyer named the Rising Dawn. He was a former submarine commander who had spent 20 years learning to fight in the silent depths of Earth's oceans before being recruited into the secret fleet program. The waiting had been the hardest part. Training in simulations, reading intelligence reports, knowing that somewhere out among the stars, entire civilizations were suffering under rule. Now the waiting was over. Enemy garrison detected on the northern continent, his tactical officer reported. Approximately 10,000 soldiers, light defensive installations, no orbital weapons platforms. Nodded, they had grown complacent in their conquered territories. They did not expect resistance here. They certainly did not expect liberation. "Open a channel to the surface," he ordered. "All frequencies, all languages in our database." The communication officers worked quickly, and Soon's voice was broadcasting across the entire planet. People of Seven, this is Captain of the Earth Liberation Fleet. We have come to end rule over your world. If you wish to be free, stay in your homes and protect your families. We will handle the rest. On the surface, beings who had known nothing but slavery their entire lives heard these words and did not believe them. It had to be a trick, another test of loyalty, another excuse to punish anyone who showed signs of independent thought. But then the human ships began their descent through the atmosphere, and the watched as strange vessels unlike anything they had ever seen opened fire on the garrison. The invaders who had ruled their world for so long ran and screamed and died, their weapons useless against attackers who moved like ghosts and struck like thunder. The battle lasted less than 4 hours. When it was over, Captain walked through the streets of the largest city with an honor guard of human soldiers. The locals watched from windows and doorways, their large eyes filled with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. Stopped in the central square where the governor had once held public executions to maintain order. "Your world is free," he announced, his words translated into the local language through speakers mounted on his armor. "The Empire no longer holds any claim over you. You may govern yourselves as you see fit. We ask nothing in return except friendship and the knowledge that you will treat others as you wish to be treated during your years of bondage." An elderly, one of the few old enough to remember the conquest, approached with trembling steps. Tears streamed from his eyes, cutting trails through the dust on his weathered face. "Why?" he asked in broken, the only language he shared with his liberator. "Why would you do this for us? You do not know us. We have nothing to offer you." Removed his helmet so the old one could see his human face, his human eyes, his human smile. "Because someone did this to us once," he said. "They came to our world thinking we would bow. They discovered we would not. And we decided that if we were strong enough to fight for ourselves, we were strong enough to fight for others." He placed his hand on the old's shoulder, a gesture that meant the same thing across species and cultures. "You are not alone anymore. None of you are." News of Seven's liberation spread through the Empire faster than the authorities could suppress it. Encrypted transmissions, smuggled data chips, whispered conversations in the dark corners of 100 oppressed worlds carried the message. Earth had defeated the invasion fleet. Earth was coming. Earth was setting the conquered free. The Imperial Council met in emergency session. The chamber was ancient, built in an age when the species had been warriors fighting for their own survival rather than masters ruling over others. Now it felt like a tomb. Supreme Archon Velar, the absolute ruler of the Empire, listened as his military commanders delivered their reports. The news grew worse with each speaker. 3 more systems had fallen to the humans. A rebellion had broken out on Sector 9. The mining operations in the outer reaches had been disrupted by sabotage. "How many ships do they have?" Velar demanded, his voice sharp with barely controlled fury. The Supreme Commander of the fleet hesitated before answering. "We are uncertain, Archon. Their vessels possess stealth capabilities beyond our ability to detect. Based on observed engagements, we estimate between 500 and 1,000 combat-capable warships, with more being constructed at an unknown rate." 1,000 ships, Velar repeated, the words like poison on his tongue. "Our empire spans 17 systems. We have tens of thousands of vessels at our command. How are these primitives defeating us?" "Their technology is superior," the commander admitted, and the words clearly caused him physical pain to speak. "Their weapons pierce our shields as if they do not exist. Their defenses absorb our attacks without damage. Their soldiers fight with a ferocity our troops have never encountered. And wherever they go, the local populations rise up against us." The Archon stood, and every being in the chamber went silent. "Then we will crush the local populations. We will burn their worlds rather than let the humans take them. We will show the galaxy that defiance against the Empire leads only to death. It was a strategy born of desperation, and it would prove to be a terrible mistake. General received reports of atrocities within days, entire cities destroyed from orbit, civilian populations massacred, worlds rendered uninhabitable by weapons designed to poison the atmosphere and water. She had expected this, she had planned for it. Implement Protocol Eclipse, she ordered. Across the Empire, human operatives who had been inserted into conquered systems activated their contingency plans. Supply lines were cut. Communication relays were destroyed. Commanders found themselves isolated and blind, unable to coordinate with each other or receive orders from the. At the same time, the human fleet split into dozens of smaller task forces, each one targeting a different system simultaneously. They could not be everywhere at once. They could not respond to threats they could not see coming. Their empire began to fracture like ice under pressure. Admiral commanded the task force assigned to the shipyards at Nexus Station. This massive orbital construction facility produced more warships than any other single location in the Empire. Its destruction would cripple military production for decades. But Admiral had no intention of destroying it. Her fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system and immediately engaged the defending forces. The battle was fierce but brief. Human weapons carved through hulls with terrible efficiency. Within an hour, the station's defenders had been eliminated. Led the boarding parties herself. At 62 years old, she was the oldest combat officer in the human fleet, but she had not risen to the rank of admiral by letting others take risks she was not willing to face. The corridors of Nexus Station were filled with the bodies of soldiers who had tried to mount a defense, stepped over them without emotion. She had seen too much death to let it affect her anymore. The station's command center was her objective. When she reached it, she found the facility's administrator waiting for her, surrounded by his staff. They had surrendered rather than die pointlessly. "This station belongs to Earth now," informed them. "You will assist in the transition of power, and you will do so without resistance. Those who cooperate will be treated fairly. Those who do not will be dealt with accordingly." The administrator, aging with scars that spoke of a military career long past, stared at her with undisguised hatred. "You think you have won," he said. "You think that because you have taken our stations and freed our slaves, you have defeated us. But you do not understand the spirit. We were conquerors before your species learned to make fire. We will be conquerors long after your bones have turned to dust." Smiled, and it was not a kind expression. "Your species has been conquering others for 10,000 years, she agreed. "In that time, you have built an empire on suffering and fear. You have crushed every challenge, destroyed every threat, eliminated every rival." She leaned closer, and her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "But you have never faced humans before, and you have no idea what we are capable of when we have something worth fighting for." She turned away, issuing orders to secure the station and begin converting its production facilities to human designs. Behind her, the administrator slumped in his chair, suddenly looking very old and very tired. The war continued for 18 months. In that time, the human fleet liberated 47 worlds. They destroyed the industrial base. They shattered their military infrastructure. They turned the Empire's own conquered subjects into a network of allies and informants that made every operation vulnerable. But they did more than simply win battles. They rebuilt what they had destroyed. They brought medicine and food to populations that had been starving. They established schools and hospitals and courts of law. They treated their former enemies with a fairness that seemed incomprehensible to beings raised on a philosophy of domination and exploitation. Former slaves became citizens. Former subjects became partners. Former enemies became, if not friends, then at least beings who recognized that the humans offered a better future than they ever had. On Earth, the war brought changes of its own. The secret military programs were no longer secret. The technologies that had been hidden were now being used openly. Human societies had to adjust to the reality that they were no longer alone in the universe, and that their species had become a major power in galactic affairs. It was not an easy adjustment. There were protests and debates and political upheavals as people processed the revelation that their governments had been lying to them for decades. But there was also pride, fierce and burning, at what humanity had accomplished. They had faced extinction and had refused to accept it. They had turned the tables on would-be conquerors. They had become liberators rather than simply survivors. General, now promoted to Supreme Commander of Human Forces, addressed the United Earth Council after the fall of the last major military installation. "We have broken their power," she said. "Their fleet is scattered, their leadership is in chaos, their economy is collapsing, but we have not yet won. The remains unconquered. Their Supreme Archon remains free. As long as these things are true, the threat remains." She paused, letting her words sink in. "It is time to finish what we started. It is time to carry our banner to the heart of the enemy and show them once, and for all that Earth does not bow to anyone." The Council approved the final campaign unanimously. 2 weeks later, the largest human fleet ever assembled began its journey toward the 500 warships, carrying 50,000 soldiers, equipped with the most advanced technology humanity had ever developed. The beings who had thought to make Earth a subject world were about to learn what it meant to face humanity's final judgment. The hung in the void like a jewel of bronze and amber, its surface covered with ancient cities and towering monuments to 10,000 years of conquest. From orbit, it seemed peaceful, beautiful even, but the human fleet approaching it knew better than to be deceived by appearances. General stood on the bridge of the human flagship, the Earth Ascendant, watching the planet grow larger in the viewing screens. Around her vessel, the mightiest fleet humanity had ever assembled waited for her command. They had traveled across the galaxy to reach this moment. They had fought through ambushes and traps and desperate last stands. They had lost friends and comrades along the way. Now they had arrived at the heart of the empire that had tried to enslave them. "Scan the defensive grid," ordered. Her tactical officer worked the controls with practiced efficiency. Multiple orbital platforms detected, approximately 200 defensive stations, heavy weapons emplacements, shield generators, and a substantial fleet presence. "I am reading over 3,000 warships in defensive formation." 3,000 ships against their 500. The numbers were not in humanity's favor, but had not expected them to be. She had planned for this. "Open a channel to the planet," she said. "I want to speak with the Supreme Archon." The communication took several minutes to establish. When the Archon finally appeared on the screen, studied him carefully. He was old, even by standards. His scales faded to a dusty gray, his eyes still burning with the same fierce pride that had driven his species to conquer half the galaxy. "Human General," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "You have come far from your world. I almost admire your audacity, but surely you do not expect to succeed here. This is the heart of the Empire. These are our finest warriors. Your little fleet will be destroyed, and then we will rebuild everything you have taken from us." Showed no emotion. "Supreme Archon, I have not come here to negotiate. I have not come here to threaten. I have come here to give you one chance to prevent the complete destruction of your civilization." The Archon laughed, a harsh sound like metal scraping against stone. "You presume to threaten us. You whose species was crawling in caves when we were building star empires. You are nothing. You are dust. And soon you will be erased from history entirely. Surrender now," continued as if he had not spoken, "and we will spare your world. Your people will live. Your culture will survive. You will face justice for your crimes, but your species will have a future. And if we refuse? His expression did not change. Then we will demonstrate what we are truly capable of, and you will serve as a warning to anyone else who might consider making the mistakes you made. The Archon's eyes narrowed. You are bluffing. You have won battles through trickery and surprise, but you cannot defeat us in direct combat. You do not have the strength. Perhaps not, admitted, but we have something your empire has never understood. We have allies. As if on cue, new signals began appearing on the tactical displays. Ships emerging from faster-than-light travel at multiple points around the system. Not human ships. Different designs, different configurations, different species. They had sent their newly built fleet of 50 vessels, constructed in secret over the past year with human assistance. The Nexus Station workers, now free beings rather than slaves, had contributed the ships they had built for themselves rather than their former masters. A dozen other liberated worlds had sent whatever forces they could spare. But the greatest surprise came from within the Empire itself. Supreme Archon, a new voice announced over the communication channel. This is Admiral of the 3rd Imperial Fleet. We will not fire upon the humans. Repeat, we will not fire. The Archon's face twisted with disbelief and fury. What treachery is this? You swore an oath to the Empire. I swore an oath to protect my people, the Admiral replied, and there was no hesitation in his voice. For too long, I have watched our empire become something monstrous. We were once explorers, Archon. We were once seekers of knowledge and builders of wonders. Now we are nothing but slavers and tyrants. The humans have shown us what we could be again if we only had the courage to change. Other voices joined in. Commanders from the 2nd Fleet, officers from the Home Guard, even some of the defensive station crews. The military, which had held together through centuries of conquest, was fragmenting under the weight of its own sins. Watched the chaos unfold on the command frequencies. She had spent months fostering these connections, reaching out to officers who were disgusted by their own government's actions, offering them a different path. Archon, she said, drawing his attention back to her, your fleet is divided. Your empire is falling apart. Your allies are abandoning you. This is your last chance. Surrender now and this ends peacefully. For a long moment, the Supreme Archon stared at her through the screen. His face cycled through emotions: rage, disbelief, calculation, and finally something that might have been fear. Never, he said at last. The Empire does not surrender. The Empire does not bow. If we must fall, we will fall fighting, and we will take as many of you with us as we can. He cut the communication. Had expected nothing less. All ships, execute attack pattern Omega. Priority targets are the loyal defense stations. Avoid engaging vessels that have defected. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Human ships danced through the defensive grid, their weapons carving through stations and loyalist vessels with surgical precision. Defecting ships turned on their former comrades, old grudges and suppressed resentments finally finding an outlet. Allied vessels from a dozen liberated worlds added their firepower to the assault. Through it all, the Supreme Archon watched from his palace at the center of the capital city. He had refused to go to the orbital command center, refused to retreat to a bunker, refused to do anything that might suggest he did not have complete confidence in victory. Now he watched the sky burn with the light of dying ships, and he knew that his confidence had been misplaced. His personal guard stood around him, their weapons ready, their eyes fixed on the windows as human began descending through the atmosphere. The planetary defenses were supposed to stop any landing attempt, but the planetary defenses were in the hands of officers who no longer obeyed his commands. Archon, his senior guard said, his voice tight with tension, we must get you to safety. The palace will not hold against a human assault. There is no safety, the Archon replied. There is nowhere left to run. The humans will follow wherever we go. They will hunt us to the ends of the galaxy if they must. He turned away from the window and looked at the beings who had served him faithfully for decades. Leave me, all of you. Find the human commanders and surrender to them. They treat prisoners well by all accounts, better than we ever did. We cannot abandon you, the guard protested. The Archon made a sound that might have been a laugh. You are not abandoning me. You are simply recognizing reality. The Empire is finished. I am finished. But you do not need to share my fate. One by one, his guards lowered their weapons and filed out of the room. The last one paused at the door, looking back at the being who had ruled over the greatest empire in galactic history. It did not have to end this way, he said. Yes, the Archon replied, it did. We simply refused to see it coming. General found the Supreme Archon alone in his throne room, surrounded by the treasures of 1,000 conquered worlds. Statues and paintings and artifacts from species that no longer existed, displayed like trophies in the home of the hunter who had killed them. She walked through the collection without touching anything, her boots echoing on the polished floor, her escort of human soldiers spreading out to secure the room. The Archon watched her approach from his throne, making no move to flee or resist. I expected someone larger, he said as she stopped before him. The stories we heard made you seem like giants, monsters from the outer darkness come to devour our children. Almost smiled. We are just beings, Archon, flesh and blood and bone, same as you. We eat, we sleep, we dream, we die. The only difference is that we refuse to accept what you tried to do to us. And now you will kill me, the Archon said. It was not a question. No, shook her head. Killing you would make you a martyr. Your people would remember you as a hero who died fighting the invaders. That is not the legacy you deserve. She gestured, and one of her soldiers stepped forward with a small device, a recording unit. Instead, you will tell the truth. You will confess publicly and completely to everything your empire has done, every world you have conquered, every species you have enslaved, every atrocity you have committed. You will describe it in detail, leaving nothing out. The Archon's eyes widened. You cannot be serious. You would have me humiliate myself, destroy my own legacy with my own words. Your legacy is already destroyed, replied. The only question is whether it will be remembered accurately. If you cooperate, if you help us document the truth, then your people will have a chance to learn from their history. They will be able to build something better. If you refuse, we will do it without you. We have captured enough records, enough witnesses, enough evidence to reconstruct the truth on our own. Your participation will simply make it easier. For a long time, the Archon sat in silence, staring at the general who had brought his empire to its knees. Then slowly, he began to laugh. You truly are a remarkable species, he said when he could speak again. You defeat us in battle, capture our worlds, turn our own people against us, and then, instead of revenge, you offer us redemption. I do not understand you. I do not think I ever will. He stood, moving carefully as if every bone in his body ached. Very well, General. I will give you your confession. I will help you document our crimes. And I hope, for the sake of my people if not myself, that they will learn from our failures. The confession took 3 days to record. When it was finished, it was broadcast across every world the Empire had ever touched. The Supreme Archon, broken and bitter, told the unvarnished truth about what his species had done. He spared no one, least of all himself. The effect was profound. On the end throughout the former empire, beings who had believed themselves to be the rightful masters of the galaxy were forced to confront the reality of their history. Many rejected it, calling the confession a fabrication, a manipulation by their human conquerors. But many others accepted it, recognizing in the Archon's words the truth they had always known but refused to acknowledge. In the years that followed, the galaxy was transformed. The Empire ceased to exist as a political entity. It was placed under the supervision of an international council composed of representatives from every species that had once conquered. The former masters learned what it meant to live alongside those they had once considered property. Humanity did not take the Empire's place. They could have. They had the military power, the technological advantage, the political momentum. But the other human leaders had never wanted dominion over others. They had wanted safety for their own world and justice for those who had been wronged. What emerged instead was something new. A galactic assembly where every species had a voice. A mutual defense agreement that protected all members from external threats. Trade agreements that spread prosperity rather than concentrating it in the hands of conquerors. A framework for cooperation that had never existed before because no one had ever been strong enough and wise enough to create it. Earth became the symbolic heart of this new order, not because humans ruled it, but because humans had been willing to fight for it. The planet that had been targeted for conquest became a destination for diplomats and scholars and refugees from across the galaxy. The species that had been dismissed as primitives became teachers and partners and friends. High Commander, who had led the first invasion, spent 20 years in a rehabilitation facility on one of the former colony worlds. When he was finally released, he dedicated the rest of his life to working with the families of those his people had harmed. He never fully understood humans, but he learned to respect them. And when he died peacefully in his sleep, there were beings of a dozen different species at his memorial service. General Sarah retired to a small house overlooking the ocean on Earth's eastern coast. She tended a garden, read books, watched the sunsets, and occasionally received visitors from across the galaxy who wanted to meet the architect of their liberation. She was always polite, always gracious, but she never spoke about the war unless specifically asked. When she did speak about it, she focused not on battles and tactics, but on the people she had lost along the way. "We did what we had to do," she said once to a young journalist who asked her how she wanted to be remembered. "We faced a threat to our existence, and we refused to accept it. But the real heroes were not the generals and admirals. They were the ordinary beings, human and otherwise, who chose to stand up when it would have been easier to stay down. They were the ones who believed that a better future was possible, even when all evidence suggested otherwise." She looked out at the ocean, her eyes distant. "We are all capable of terrible things, the proved that. But we are also capable of great things, of courage and sacrifice and compassion. The question every species must answer is which of those capabilities they will choose to embrace." The Empire had thought Earth would bow. They had expected primitives to fall before the might of ancient conquerors. They had been so certain of their superiority that they never imagined a different outcome was possible. Instead, they had awakened a species that refused to surrender. They had united a galaxy against their tyranny. They had inspired their own subjects to rise up and claim their freedom. And now, in every system that had once known the shadow of oppression, a different flag flew. Not the banner of Earth, though humans were honored everywhere they went. Not the symbols of any single species or nation. It was a flag designed by the newly formed Galactic Assembly, chosen by representatives of every liberated world. Blue for the oceans of Earth, where the resistance had begun. Gold for the hope that had sustained so many through centuries of darkness. And at the center, a single word in the universal trade language that had emerged from the ruins of empire. Free. The galaxy had been transformed, and it would never be the same again. Those who had once been slaves now sat as equals beside their former masters. Those who had once lived in fear now walked without looking over their shoulders. Those who had once believed that might made right had learned, painfully, that courage and compassion could overcome even the greatest power. And on a small blue planet at the edge of the galaxy, the people who had made it all possible continued living their lives, raising their families, pursuing their dreams. They did not think of themselves as heroes. They had simply done what needed to be done when the time came to do it. But across the stars, in 1,000 different languages, on 1,000 different worlds, stories were told about the day humanity decided to fight back. Songs were sung about the liberation. Monuments were built to honor the fallen. And children of every species grew up knowing that no matter how dark things might seem, no matter how impossible the odds might appear, there was always hope. Because once upon a time, an empire had looked at a small blue world and seen easy prey. They had sent their fleets and their armies, confident in their inevitable victory. And Earth had answered them with fire.